Ladies and gentlemen, we've got more absolutely critical, absolutely huge news when it comes to the future of college football regarding conference realignment. Take a little look at this tweet. It says, text from my source in West Virginia, and the text basically says that there was an emergency expansion committee meeting that happened last night within the Big 12. They're talking about Pac-12's contract offer from ESPN. It's got everyone on edge, so that's the Big 12 meeting last night about expansion. We know the Big 12 currently is shopping, and there have been reports that they could add several teams by the first week of August. That is what we are expecting. We've also got other stuff. ESPN is in full support of an alliance for the Pac-12, Big 12, and the ACC, and that makes complete sense. The ESPN is going to want to protect their assets, being the ACC and being the Pac-12. We know they made a major offer last night for a big 12-year TV commitment, 12-year TV deal at around $360 million. I think that was the figure over 12 years, and ESPN is not going to want the Big 12 poaching Pac-12 teams. That's why they say, listen, let's get an alliance going so the Pac-12 stays relevant. That makes sense, and I'm sure the Big 12, who currently wants to add more teams to really become the third conference in college football, they're not interested in an alliance with the ACC and the Pac-12 at this point. We've also got this. Apparently, Arizona State is interested in the Big 12 again. Why are these schools so wishy-washy? So, listen, why would Arizona State not be interested in the Big 12? You want to keep all your options open. There is a scenario, and a very viable scenario, where the Pac-12 dissolves completely or basically becomes a shell of itself if Washington and Oregon leave, and then you've got the idea of Stanford and California also leaving. If you're Arizona State, why would you not consider going to the Big 12? Shouldn't you keep all? It's not like you don't have much leverage here if you're Arizona State. So Arizona State's now like, oh, we want into the Big 12 right now. It's not surprising. So we'll see if anything comes of this. But the schools that we've heard, it's mainly Colorado and Arizona going to the Big 12. Also, there's a rumor out there of Stanford and Cal. I don't know how real that one is. And then Utah possibly as well. We will see. We've also got Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and California want the same percentage split with the new contract offer that they requested in the last one. No grant of rights, no exit fee. Basically, take as much money as possible and a free ticket out if the Big Ten comes calling. So that's basically especially what Oregon and Washington want. They want the invite to the Big Ten. They know they're going to make so much more money going to the Big Ten, and the last thing they want is to be tethered down by a disgusting, horrible 12-year contract from ESPN. ESPN has offered them a 12-year contract right now, and they're saying, listen, we can do it, but we want to be able to get out of it with no exit fee so we can go to the Big Ten if the Big Ten wants to add us in the event they expand to either 18 or 20 teams. Stanford and California, very similar. We've heard the rumors of Stanford possibly going to either the Big 12 or the Big 10. Personally, I think it's much more realistic Stanford goes with Notre Dame to the Big Ten in 2025. California would be wanted by the Big Ten due to their academics, but it seems more of a long shot California would be headed to the Big Ten. It seems more likely California would be more of a fit in the Big 12, but it's very clear, at least at this point, Oregon and Washington especially don't want to have a long, and also Stanford and California. None of these four schools want a long-term association with the Pac-12 because they know the money sucks compared to potentially getting into other conferences. Expansion Committee presented a lot of info to Bowlesby and Yormark. Most of it was in-depth financials done by our media consultants. Big 12 has a chance to get into 20 million households with additions. That's only 4 million less than SEC, so I mean, I don't know where they're getting that number from. Personally, I don't know why they would compare themselves to the SEC. That's a little silly. But I guess they're saying if we add teams, the overall reach is going to be bigger. That's what they're trying to say. My main issue with the Big 12, even if they add teams, the issue is there's no super team in that conference. With the loss of Oklahoma and Texas, there's no blue blood, which is a major problem. Now, maybe you can create a blue blood organically, but that takes time. Right now, like if Oregon joins the Big 12 right now, Oregon becomes like the most powerful team in that conference, at least in my opinion. There's just a lot of like good programs like Oklahoma State, TCU, whatever, but there's no Texas, there's no Ohio State, there's no Alabama in the new Big 12. That's my main issue with the Big 12. And then it says there was a request to show what the projections would be adding the same 3 Pac-12 schools and 1 Group of 5 school that I cannot name right now. So I'm guessing he's referring to San Diego State being the Group of 5 school. Every school in the Pac-12 has now individually contacted the Big 12 in some way regarding information on possible membership, some more serious than others, some using us for leverage. So, wow, that's very interesting. It does make sense. These schools are looking for an out. It doesn't hurt anyone to contact the Big 12 if the Pac-12 ends up dissolving. You always want to have an exit plan. Thoughts are that Warren was deliberately trying to create instability amongst Pac-12 and ACC with his comments today. Warren and Yormark hit it off well, and there are already talks of a B-ball partnership with the Big Ten, similar to the SEC challenge. So that's very interesting if they end up doing something like that. Getting some reports that the Big Ten and their commissioner may have blundered and put the Big Ten at risk for litigation from Pac-12 regarding the UCLA departure. So that's not good news there. I don't think it's going to... Yeah, they say it's a possible lawsuit. Basically, the Big Ten contacted UCLA first. But that one... So then the Big Ten contacted USC first as well, I'm guessing? So this is the major news, and this was last night tweeted out. The Big Ten commissioner told the Action Network there are a handful of schools besides Notre Dame that would add value to the Big Ten. Sources say other schools being considered currently by the Big Ten: Oregon, Washington, Stanford, California, Miami, and Florida State. As someone that knows a lot about realignment, I'm just going to say right now, Miami and Florida State are a pipe dream. I see very little chance of that happening at all. So let's set aside Miami and Florida State. Oregon seems like a situation where you would really need a lot to happen for Oregon to get into the Big Ten at this point. The report is the next 2 teams up would be Stanford and Notre Dame, specifically Notre Dame. And if Notre Dame comes, they would bring Stanford. And if they don't bring Stanford, they would bring Washington. And then if they don't bring Washington, then it would be Oregon. So Oregon, at least how it was explained to me, would be the 3rd team brought up. And then they also have Stanford, and then they also have California on that list as well, which is another situation where I think the only way California would get into the Big Ten, maybe like a 24-team conference. It just doesn't make much sense if you are expanding to 20 teams and 2 of those teams are Notre Dame and Stanford. Why would California be a team that you would want? You've already got UCLA and USC from the state. Do you really need to add California at that point? I don't think so personally. So this could all be posturing, it's whatever. He's Kevin Warren. Or this, I don't even think, he didn't say this. This was the sources that say these are the teams that are being considered. And again, if I had to rank these teams, Notre Dame is still number 1. Stanford would be number 2. Washington would be number 3. Oregon would be number 4, California would be number 5, Miami and Florida State would be 6 and 7. I just haven't heard any legitimate other rumors about Miami and Florida State going to the Big Ten at this point. And I'm not even going to get into the possible scenario where that happens, because that would include that whole ACC grant of rights mess being opened up. And at that point, I mean, if we live in a world where Miami is part of the Big Ten, then I would bet everything on my life that Clemson would be in the SEC. But I'm not even going to get into that hypothetical, because that's almost just a waste of time at this point. But it would be a situation where Miami and Florida State would head to the Big Ten. The SEC would get Clemson. They would get, Florida. You think the SEC would want Florida State. They would get Clemson. They would maybe get Virginia, North Carolina, and Duke. I'm just thinking about what would happen, but realistically, I think the Big Ten, it would be, the next move is North Carolina and Stanford. And then if they want to go to 20 teams, I think it is interesting that if you were to ask me what are the two ACC schools I think that could potentially go to the Big Ten, I wouldn't say Florida State and Miami. Now, this is just one source opinion, so I wouldn't take this at gospel, but I think the Big Ten would target Virginia out of the ACC along with North Carolina or Duke. Something like that, instead of Miami and Florida State. I think Miami and Florida State are much more likely SEC teams, but there's also that wrinkle that apparently Miami is not liked at all by many SEC programs. I don't know why that is, but I keep hearing that Miami is just hated by the SEC, so that's why they wouldn't be in the SEC. If the SEC does expand through the ACC, it would be Clemson, Florida State. Apparently the SEC wants North Carolina bad. As well. So the North Carolina is a very valuable program. That's the thing. But guys, overall, the situation with the Big 12, they want to expand. They're having these meetings weekly at this point, and it is a developing situation. We are expecting something to happen possibly the first week of August with 2, 4, or maybe even 6 teams going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. We heard the news today about that. The ESPN wanting that alliance. These alliances at this point should be just disbanded. You shouldn't do conference alliances. It's dumb. But the idea of a conference alignment between the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the ACC makes no sense from a Big 12 perspective. It does make sense from a Pac-12 perspective, and it makes sense for ESPN because ESPN is trying to keep the Pac-12 together right now. They're doing whatever they can to keep Oregon and Washington in the Pac-12, but it's very clear based off of the demands that Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and California made, saying we want no exit fee. We want to be able to leave this conference whenever we want for free. They're basically saying we're using this conference as a buffer right now to give ourselves some legitimacy, but when the Big Ten opens up more spots, we're gone, which is completely obvious. The Big Ten makes way more money. You're going to be making almost $100 million more if you're a part of the Big Ten, if unequal revenue sharing doesn't get enacted into the Big Ten, because that might throw a wrench into those numbers. We'll see if that happens. That's the new thing with college football, with the unequal revenue sharing, and it makes sense why that would be a thing, but that's a whole nother topic. Either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.